Good morning and welcome to the Australian Journal for Environmental Education Research Symposium. Really pleased to have you here with us today on the 23rd of October. Looking forward to a jam-packed program of discussion and listening and thinking about our two fabulous special issues that we're going to launch today officially. So thank you very much for joining us for this really important time of being in community and enjoying everybody's hard work right at the end, at the special end, when we get to publish our manuscripts and pull them together in collections that really matter. As we get going today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands which we gather. And we're spanning countries and continents today. So please, in the chat, acknowledge the country that you're on. Thank you very much, Sandra, for leading the way. Today I'm standing on Wurundjeri country and appreciating the change in season where we're in the middle of Porneet, which is the season where the tadpoles are birthing and growing. So it's a really lovely time to feel connected to our frog species and kin and think about how we all inhabit this space together. So please acknowledge your country and connections and care for country in our chat. And I can shout out that we are across Brazil, all across Australia. We have Canada represented. Special shout out to Tasmania, of course, part of Australia, but deserves a special shout out. And I think too for WA, Sandra, it's nice and early where you are. So thank you very much to lots of people for joining today. I hope today feels like a wonderful celebration of lots of hard work and great fun work. I'm just going to run through a few things about AJEE, as we affectionately call our journal, just to get you to know our journal a little bit. And thank you very much for your patience. For those of you that I can see who know our journal very well, good morning, Annette. Lovely to see you. Hi, Tracy. Great to have you with us as well. The editorial executive is a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to Amrita, who's here with us today, and Sandra, as I mentioned already. Kat Riley, of course, is here. Apologies from Scott Jukes. And I think Hillary is apologies as well. Marianne's here. Fabulous to have you with us, Marianne. Thank you so much. Joe Ferguson is also an apology. We're a really tight team of people who work all through the month to think about the different stages of your manuscripts and to keep things moving really well. And I think we've done pretty well. This year has been a bit of a tough year for our publisher, Cambridge University Press. They've had a fairly significant glitch in their system, and we're pleased to be back up and in action, and really pleased to be celebrating these 2 releases of issues today. Also, it's important, and I'm with pleasure, I acknowledge our editorial board, and there are some of you here with us today. I mentioned Annette and Tracy, Paul, and I've probably missed some others. Gosh, I'm sorry if I have. But we're really pleased that our active editorial board works with us to think carefully about how our journal manages and moves forward in these really interesting times. As many of you will know, AJEE is active on socials, so we use, I suppose, a Facebook and a LinkedIn platform, and we like to share each of our published papers, some of the highlights about what it means to be in our community, and to really use that as a focal point to keep our community active and together. You may know that AJEE has been ranked in the first quartile in the last lot of rankings that came out. So we're very excited about this. This means a lot to us. It represents a lot of hard work from all of us here in our community. So thank you. We're also a Gold Open Access journal, which for those of you with transformative agreements makes publishing very easy. But I want to make sure that those of you who don't or aren't part of a university with a transformative agreement realize that We have a very good relationship with Cambridge University Press, and they have committed that no author will go unpublished because of our article processing charge. So please make sure you're very persistent and get those waivers in place if you need them, and always shout out to me if you need any support with that. We are publishing 5 issues a year, and this year we've published volume 40, which is pretty fantastic. We've got a very long-standing journal, significant contribution to the field, and I'm really pleased to be working with this journal at this point in time. So we're hosting our research symposium today. It's a biennial research symposium because in the other years we love to support our host organisation, the Australian Association for Environmental Education, and so we support hosting the research symposium that's connected with the conference that A Squared E Squared hosts. So that today we're hosting our biennial research symposium. And we've announced a call for 3 special issues for volume 41. So there's a lot going on in the journal. Some data that's going in the right direction. This is just about our citation factor. If you want to know any more, sorry, our impact factor. If you would like to know any more about this, you're welcome to be in touch. Couple of things that are important to think about in our website. Our website is managed by Cambridge University Press, so you can see it here. We're really pleased to be hosting now a community page, and this allows us to share our recent calls, our socials updates, any videos or extra things that we've got going on. Please have a look in our community page. It's a great place for you to stay connected. Also this year, we're really pleased to be updating and really freshening up our collections. We recently published a collection celebrating Annette Goff. Great to have you here with us today, Annette. Thanks for being here. Where we curated all of the works that she's contributed to in the journal over its 40 years. And if you have a look in that collection, you'll see that it's significant. So we really appreciate your work in this space, Annette, and value you and honour you as one of our important members. Also, we've curated here collections for our special issues, our recent special issues. So we're really pleased today to be launching the 2 special issues. Just a little shout out though, the Power and Politics special issue is really most easily available or accessible in the collection. Because it actually hasn't launched yet. So the issue is coming in the next few days. We're just waiting for our last 2 manuscripts to pop up as published, and then the issue will be coming through. So we're still going to go ahead with our fabulous celebration, but just with that little caveat. So the special issues that we're launching today are these 2, and I'm really pleased now to just to update you with the program. I've done my little introduction. I'm going to hand over to Dr. Catherine Riley, who is going to give us some information and talk to us about the relational ontology special issue. Then I'm going to hand over to Paul, and then Paul will do the same for the Power and Politics special issue. Then we've got 6 presenters who are going to give us very short, succinct overviews of their manuscripts. And after 3 of each of our speakers, we'll move into a discussion. So I'll manage that and describe the process a little bit more later. We have a Padlet for today, and I can pop the link for the Padlet in the chat. But you can also use your QR code to have a look for that in the moment. Sorry, I should have done this earlier, but I'll just pop the link in the chat now. If you would like to contribute comments or thoughts, that would be great. We'll also be using this as part of our discussion process. Okay, so that's how the day's going to work. We're going to finish at 12:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So we've got a little bit of time now to enjoy our special issues. And to help us enjoy the relational ontology special issue, I'm really pleased to introduce you to Catherine Riley. Over to you, Kat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you everybody for being here today. It's such an honour to share this special issue, and I recognise many of our authors have joined us today. I've got 20 minutes, so this is going to be rapid fire. So as Peter said, I'm Kat Riley, and I had the pleasure and privilege of guest editing the Relational Ontologies and Multi-Species World special issue with AJEE. alongside Dr. Scott Jukes from Federation University and Dr. Paulina Raudio from the University of Oulu in Finland. Next slide, please, Peter. So I'm situated on Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Canada, and the original lands of the Anishinaabe, the Innuit, the Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Oyate, and Dene, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. This treaty was to ensure the land was to be shared with all our relations, including more than human relations. And as an Aussie, I also need to acknowledge my original homeland of Bunwurrung country, home of the Kulin Nation in Southeast Australia. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to speak about the importance of this call and the gems in this special issue that came through as well. Thanks, Peter. We're a little bit out of sync, but that's okay. Thank you so much. So really, the multitude of converging and diverging ecological and social crises the planet is now faced with are steeped in racist, classist, speciest, and gendered processes of domination and marginalization. Such an intersectional analysis begets a revisioning of Western education that is better equipped to grapple with such crises, understanding that education is, or it could be, an ethical project that can strive to move students and communities from one way of being to another. Next slide. Such an ethical project needs to be critical. It needs to work to disrupt neoliberal governance that affirms staunch, self-determined agency that suggests individuals can achieve when they are provided with the right tools for learning. The project must break the trends of advanced capitalism that suggest teachers and learners are consumers of education rather than living education through relationally derived ethics. And it must speak truth to the ubiquity of colonial land relations that exploit by dispossession and tactics of accumulation. Such an ethical project also requires creative modes of method and thought that repositions the human in iterative, ongoing, and dynamic relationships with broader ecologies of the world, not just as individuals in the world. In defining progress narratives in education that continue to emphasize doctrines of individualism, achievement, and outputs through a single-minded focus on outcomes-focused ideals, the ontological shift in this special issue demonstrates agency as distributed across all actors, in that we are co-constituted and co-implicated through our entangled yet very much differentiated categories and boundaries. Following this, knowing, being, thinking, and doing are not located as in an autonomous or a discrete separate individual, but generated in concert with the discursive social structures and lively relationships with other species and more than human worlds. So authors in this special issue did a marvelous job to dismantle this anthropocentric about the human species and human-centric about the human self, the hubris that is involved with that thinking, to produce less certain but more socially and ecologically attuned and thus responsible teachers and learners. Next slide, please. So through a meta-analysis of each article that we received, 16 in total, 4 interrelated and intersecting clusters emerged that we identified as wrestling in the ruins, the hope for a decolonial environment, for creatures, critters, and vegetal life, playing in the ruins, the hope for productive technologies, belonging in the ruins, the hope for relational care ethics. Following Hannah Arendt from 1961, we see the ruins as an opportunity for critical and creative inquiry into what has been laid bare, starting from the grim and unjust realities of social and ecological crises, and grounding ourselves as responsible and complicit within these impoverished systems in these troubled times. So the pink nodes that you'll see on the screen here are our Wrestling in the Ruins articles. The first one in the issue is by myself and Scott Jukes, in which we confront haunting presents and futures in EE through a form of dark pedagogy. We talk in this article about a context in the Australian Alps and the reordering of human-bison relations through settler colonialism in the Canadian prairies. We explore the duration of things and consider the relationality of time, dark pedagogy, to help us remember ghosts and ponder practices for anti-colonial responsibilities. Ranjan data in relationality Indigenous climate change education research focuses on the experiences and knowledge of Indigenous communities in the Chittagong Hill Tracts to unravel the intricate web of connections between community members, their environments, and the impact of climate change. In Birdsong, Pedagogies of Attunement and Surrender with More Than Human Teachers, Kay Sidebottom and Lou Mycroft adopt a critical post-humanist account to argue for different educational enactments that trouble nature-culture binaries. And this wonderful article was written from the Yorkshire Dales in the UK, which was a real gift to have as part of our collection. In the Kinning in the Ruins cluster, we move to the orange nodes now. Authors demonstrate human stories as mutually imbricated with critters of many genders and kinds, all within their specific locales. In Lingering with Multi-Species Kin, Jenny Byman and colleagues explore multi-species education research and practice through their ethnographic study in a Finnish primary school to consider and create new avenues for thinking about multi-species relationalities. Rachel Kovalchon and Casey Myers take the reader on a journey through a diffractive mapping of movement in early childhood education in How Do Bugs Move Us? Decentering, connecting, and rupturing, authors in this article literally move early years teachers and learners to relational accountability with multi-species. In Assemblages in Flight, Peter Renshaw, Kirsty Jackson, and Ron Tooth adopt research as assemblage to foreground the vitality and relational agency of other species they encounter. They think about and practice with multi-species entanglements between a crow, the child, a sea eagle, and the bee to show how rhizomic networks are materially and discursively formed across time and space within the affective milieu. Elizabeth Boileau in Navigating Approaches to Thinking With works with young children to provide an exploration of post-human thinking doing to navigate the planning and conducting of research with more than human worlds. This manuscript was great in its ability to speak to practice, almost like a recipe to how to do post-humanist work. So that was wonderful. Amelie Strange, then in Solitary But Not Alone, really queries the boundaries with a leafcutter bee to demonstrate that nature is not a concept embedded within human experience, but produced through human and more than human relationality. In Planty Childhood, Snea Palmer, Karen Malone, and Tracy Young focus on human-plant relations through a vegetal ontological approach as a mode of a relational ontology. They turn to Indian Vedic traditions to help abandon hierarchical comparisons of plants who have often been historically and systemically positioned as the lesser species or mere objects and resources. Moving into the yellow nodes, ruins act as sites for playful inquiry at the margins as authors show how multi-species worlds are co-composed at the intersections of traditional and innovative technologies. David Roussel and Jessica Tran find resonance with Indigenous knowledges, which have long recognised trees as intelligent and caring creatures. They work through 3 empirical examples of it located in Naarm in Melbourne to trouble Western images of thought and speak to the contours of emplaced, relational and pluralistic ontologies of Indigenous sciences and traditional ecological knowledges. In An Anthropologist Fails to Become Fish, Matt Buttacavoli provides an autoethnography that describes how he sought to listen to the Great Barrier Reef off the Queensland coast through mediating technologies and artistic practices. He does not shy away from methodological failures and roadblocks, but illuminates the messy, contingent, contextualized difficulties in understanding non-human sensory worlds. Jonathan Lynch and Herbert Thomas then break down dualisms and human-centric thinking and challenge neoliberal and capitalist education to think about reconceptualizing the use of digital technology as something learners are entangled with in outdoor education practices through their new materialist-inspired research. Finally, belonging in the ruins, denoted by the green nodes in our bottom left-hand corner. This is the part of our project that critically questions and recreates the kinds of worlds that we want to belong to. So really assessing what it means to belong in impoverished systems. Abby McDonald and Kim Beasy seek different ways of knowing across the Watershed project from diverse perspectives, environmental ethics, multi-species culture, and place of Lake Pedder in Tasmania. They think with UNESCO's Pillars of Education to explicate a process of relational and collaborative meaning making, to present a practice and process of education. So again, so many of our articles in this brilliant special issue did speak to the empirical aspects of research. And it's great to see the post-humanism is expanding, not to be a philosophical idea up here, but something that's very grounded, practical and tangible in practice for our teachers as well. Angela Malloy Murphy makes a case for planetary degradation at the hands of white Western colonial positivist, supremacist, and anthropocentric thinking, restoring the value of all earthly relations. Angela counters human exceptionalism to acknowledge the entangled nature of our existence, to keep the way open for more livable worlds. Hannah Hogarth and Charlotte Hankin employ mess making as an act of resistance to narratives of progress, consumption, categorization, etc. They rethink the neat and tidy relations that cause damage in more than human relations and conceptualize how we, as ecosystems of thriving life forms, are constantly living, learning, and dying together. And then finally, the last manuscript, but certainly not least in this special issue, from Hilary Whitehouse, adopts a document case study approach to narrate aspects of kindship work of a network of carers and educators of flying foxes. Conceptualizing kindship as a form of caring for other than human kin, Whitehouse suggests that volunteering to care and educate for Australian flying mammals is a form of activism for interspecies justice in a nation with a mammalian extinction crisis. Thank you, Peter. Next slide. We're almost there. There's a lot of amazing, rich and complex ideas to try to distill into 15 or so minutes. So ultimately, this special issue brings into question the asymmetrical flows that shape the relational space. Authors in this special issue did an amazing job to critically and creatively ask whose worlds are we attempting to make more livable and whose temporal horizons are our futures composed of. We also invited our authors to create, as part of our launch, a series of videos that spoke to their manuscript. So Scott has been amazing in working with AJEE and Jamie at CUP to curate this site here. So we have 6 currently that are live and ready to be viewed, with more on the way as well. So I definitely encourage you and invite you to check those out. And they do offer an amazing support and accompaniment to the written text of the manuscripts. So that is all I have from this relational ontology special issue, and I would love to send a heartfelt thank you and sincere gratitude. I learned incredible amounts from my co-editors and also the authors that contributed. So thank you very, very much for having the care and the kindness and I guess the persistence to get this work done in very troubled times. So thank you.
Thank you, Kat. I'm sure everyone will join with me to say, wow, that was a beautiful bringing together of the community that is your special issue. Just a little, how do you find the fantastic authors videos? If you come to our homepage, come to our AJEE community page, scroll down a little bit to where it says manuscript video introductions and click here. You'll come to this fantastic page where they've been represented, I think, quite beautifully. So a testament to our relationship with Cambridge University Press and fantastic intentions from our really wonderful guest authors, guest editors. So Catherine, Scott, and Paulina, thank you so much. As a way of marking this moment, I'm going to invite you to join with me in a stand up and a shakedown so that we can launch this special issue. So come on, everybody, stand up and have a shakedown. I know it's so unusual, isn't it? Right, come on. And then here's a lovely strategy that I learned from our fabulous A squared E squared president, Lisa Siegel. She encourages her students to high five each other on the side of the screen. I'd love it just for a handhold. If you're high fiving, no worries, but also just a yes, we're in community. Thank you so much. Oh gosh, I love that you're doing that. Here, let me take a photo. That's wonderful. And what a lovely moment to say thank you again to Kat. Thank you so much for the beautiful presentation this morning. This marks a really lovely transition. Unfortunately, Kat can't stay with us all the time that we're here today. And I did some shout outs of locations as we started, and I knew that was a mistake because I'd missed some very important locations. But Emily, thank you for joining us from Arizona. That's no mean feat. So really lovely to have you here. Charlotte from Bali, also fantastic effort. Some colleagues from Western Australia. It's early there, so that's wonderful. And Jonathan, you're from New Zealand. So we really are a wonderful international community. And I apologise if I've missed others. And I've just seen Chris has joined us as well from New Zealand. So great to have you here. Wonderful. Thank you very much. It's now a great opportunity to have Paul present to us some information, ideas, thoughts about the Power and Politics special issue. Paul, you won't have slides, I think, today. Is that correct?
No, I don't know. You have to listen to me and my boring discussion here.
Well, I would just love everybody to hover over Paul's picture if you can find him on the screen. And if you click on the three dots and say pin, and then scroll down to the pin, you can see Paul nice and big. So there you go, Paul. Everyone's looking at you nice and closely. And it's my pleasure to introduce Emeritus Professor Paul Hart to present to us about the special issue, Power and Politics. Thank you, Paul.
Well, thank you very much. And now for something completely different. That was a wonderful presentation. I enjoyed that very much. You're going to have to listen to me on this one. So I would like to talk about the special issue on power and politics that I worked on for a long time and enjoyed very much. It's called Re-engaging Environmental Education Research within Critical Environmental Politics. And politics is not an easy, as you know from Donald Trump and others in the United States, is not an easy task. So what I want to do is go through this in a fashion that will give you an idea of the complexity that people were working with. So I'll start this way with this framing that is going beyond preaching to the converted. In Silent Spring, now a classic of modern environmentalism, Rachel Carson argued that we are at a crossroads, one path leading to disaster, the other offering a chance of preserving life on Earth. This focus on the future has become a defining trait of modern environmental activism and education. And because environmental education has become more overtly political within an ecology of worldviews and new approaches to Earth system governance, the literature of environmental politics is increasingly focused on a planetary justice framework that has distinctive political features. However, environmental politics is complex, multidimensional, expanding rapidly and becoming more visible and transparent within a variety of emerging approaches as evolving perspectives for educational provision and debate. And it is not always clear what educational forms such politics could take across educational levels. So the aim of this special issue was to introduce and explore ideas about political dimensions that underpin newer thinking and debate concerning the theory and practice of environmental education experiences for young people. Engaging different perspectives across a variety of learning experiences is intended to facilitate communication and potential collaboration in addressing the critical urgency of current ecological problems as political problems that impact natural environments, social institutions, and human consciousness. For example, over many years, we have come to more deeply appreciate concerns about crises such as mass extinctions of species, global climate change, ocean acidification, economic instabilities, and many related human environment issues that are subject to different points of view. So the current reality, this special issue invited critical exploration of environmental education spaces within a rapidly growing political ecology where dimensions of power and politics intentionally, inadvertently, or subtly influence what and why we think we know, and how those dimensions increasingly influence our decisions and activities. So it could be argued that it is a lack of political will that leaves large-scale social transformation and structural changes unimplemented. However, the return to planetary justice scholarship as performative tends to focus on how planetary health can be pursued within the context of the Anthropocene. In response, this special issue was intended to create openings for critical exploration of a rapidly expanding political ecology of environmental education. Potential authors were encouraged, to consider how dimensions of politics and power may work to influence what we think we know and how we may act to advance our activities within teacher education and school curriculum. So within the framing of this special issue, the challenge to authors was necessarily complex. The concept of environmental politics itself revolves around theoretical differences concerning political dynamics, social boundaries, and expanded dimensions such as planetary boundaries. The current challenge relates to environmental educators, how they might engage this evolution of thinking and practice within the acknowledged politics of change. So in the prospectus for this special issue, authors were asked to consider how to open up new directions, particularly within politically oriented debates that often appear as technologies of power. For example, it seemed crucial to question how educators could include dimensions of global politics as well as political agency within changing Anthropocene conditions. The reason, quite simply, environmental education is evolving, as it must, amidst a politics of continuing economic growth and neoliberalism. Global expansion rhetoric continues to challenge sustainability discourse. Capitalist growth continues within the declining quality of the material life world. This has led, among other things, to questions of planetary limits as viable, ecologically sustainable projections of living within sustainable planetary boundaries. But as you might expect, it's not that simple. Authors of this special issue were encouraged to engage literature that advocates working at several levels of theory and practice with certain goals in mind. For example, goals such as working at several levels of theory and practice with goals such as planetary limits that are now more seriously considered as viable, sustainable projections of living within our means, but also living within sustainable planetary boundaries. Such increasingly political complexity implicates extended debate concerning the viability of alternative models of environmental discourse as politically complex. In creating conditions for exploration of such debate, SI authors were encouraged to create openings for difficult conversations concerning the futures of EE research at a critical juncture where humans are slowly coming to understand the eventualities of new means of production within boundaries or limits for climate change. As a result, authors in this special issue expanded sets of goals for charting future directions as political dimensions of living within planetary commons. And readers of this special issue will encounter the rhetoric of these authors, each in their own way, so as to intensify this evolving focus on research futures and insufficiencies of current socio-political infrastructures. For example, David Orr on the missing politics of environmental education research, Cassandra Teitler on the creation of new spaces for resistance and reimagination, Bronwyn Davies on questions of what matters, Noel Goff on alternative futures, Hela Latsisitka on politics of transgression, Helen Kopnina and Timothy Bedford on reorienting pedagogy, Leslie DeGrange on transitioning to politics, and Kevin Zhao on challenging teachers to take a larger role in expanding current practices leading to longer-term development that includes political dimensions of an ecologically minded society. Fabian Pettick and Daniela Lipp on recentering the political in ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, within political spaces of possible futures. And there is more from other authors. Time permitting, I would have listed them as well. So it seemed appropriate to create a special issue for exploration of these evolving perspectives that address this biopolitical turn within the politics of social ecological transformation. And as a result, this SI considers the present as a time to reconsider and to actively debate the kinds of political spaces required to engage current dimensions of power and control, dimensions that cannot explore environmental politics concerning global futures, as well as the planetary nature of challenges that transcend national boundaries and geographical imbalances. So for this SI, we encouraged authors to focus on conversations of environmental political thinking that reflects critically on the role that research and environmental education should or could play in reshaping the nature of environmental ed discourse. Arguably, such discourse has the potential to create openings for questions of equity of power and politics in the construction of vital responses to dimensions of global and local health and well-being. Perhaps such special issue deliberations also have the potential to influence environmental and educational futures as more critically engaged within the inevitable politics that currently surrounds the futures of both environment and education, precisely because they illustrate the kind of response now required across the complex dimensions of conversations of power and politics that promise to challenge thinking within EE or environmental education journals. So that's my talk.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I'm sure you can see everyone joining me in showing our
slide.
That's wonderful.
Sorry.
Now we have a real treat for everyone this morning in that we've invited several authors, six manuscripts from our special issue to present their manuscripts to us. We've framed them in lots of three, and at the end of each 8-minute presentation, we'll then pop out into breakout rooms and enjoy a conversation. The Padlet link that I have popped in the chat, and will do so again, is to encourage you to consider the presentations as you're listening to them, but also to share your thoughts as a small group. And then when we come back together, we'll discuss some of the Padlet contributions as a whole group. So our intention was to hear from three of our manuscript authors in quick succession, and then to spend some time discussing that in small groups, and then coming back together as a whole group to explore some of those highlights from our discussions. And then we'll repeat again for our second collection of 3 authors. Okay, I hope that seems clear. I think I've got everything. You've got the Padlet link, and we have Chris Eames, our first author here. I'll let you know, Hala Lotzasiska has generously prepared a pre-recorded message for us. She was hoping to be here, but unfortunately it's very late for her right now, and she's got a lot on. So she at the last minute decided to prepare a pre-record, which is really fantastic. And then Helen Kopnina and I met on the weekend, and she generated a pre-record for us as well. So thanks very much to both of them for making special effort to be here, even though they can't actually be here. But Chris, we're very pleased to have you here today. You're presenting on a manuscript called Engaging Environmental Education Through PISA, Leveraging Curriculum as a Political Process, with 3, I think, very special colleagues. So over to you.
Thanks, Peter, for that introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Fantastic. It's a long way from New Zealand, so just wanting to make sure that was
Yes.
coming through loud and clear. So I'm just going to share a screen. I do have a few slides just to work through, and that is the beginning. So as I begin, ko parongia te maunga e rū ne tāku nākau, ko Waikato te awa e mahia ne tāku maharahara, ke te whare wānanga o Waikato e mahi ana ko Chris Eames Tokawingwa. So I've just introduced myself to locate myself in my place on the land of the Tainui people. Parongia is my local mountain, Waikato is my local river, and this is a picture of our latest building on the university campus, the PA, which is a meeting place, and so that locates me at the University of Waikato today. So as Peter has indicated, I'm talking about this particular paper that I was able to have the pleasure of co-authoring with Martha Munro, Peter White, and Nicole Ardwin. But I just wanted also to acknowledge the work that Peter and Paul, and particularly Paul with his introduction to the special issue, and the opportunity to actually express our work through this particular special issue. So if you'd like to have a look at, if you haven't already read the paper, hopefully this will give you a small introduction to it, and I encourage you to go and look at it later at your leisure. So these are the people. Again, just mihi to those to acknowledge the work that everybody's done. We began working together in 2021, so this is a 3-year project currently, and we're ongoing. We're just Friday we're flying to Singapore for the next stage of this work, and it's an ongoing political process, I would have to say. Leave it there. So in case you don't know much about PISA, it's the Program for International Student Assessment. It's operating every 3 to 4 years now, has been going since 2000, and is focused on looking at 15-year-old students' capacities, or excuse me, competencies, I should say, within 3 domains: maths, reading, and science. And every 3-year cycle, the focus is on one of those with a little bit of extra on the others. And so this coming year, 2025, out of phase because of COVID, we're focusing heavily on the science space. And in the PISA assessment, it's a combination of the cognitive tests, top right of the screen, science, mathematics, and reading, and then some innovative tests around particular domains. And you can see, for instance, global competencies in there, which is quite useful for our area of environmental education. And there's a survey, which is the kind of test. Sorry, there's a test, and then there's a survey where they indicate or they get ideas about different things that students are interested in. And the questionnaires, which go to parents, students, and schools, looking at other aspects of what is being taught, how it's being taught, and some of the more or the less cognitive areas of endeavor that the students might be able to comment on. So basically, what I want to do is spend the rest of this few minutes just looking at the PISA opportunity. Now, so some of you who know about PISA and how it works, then we created a framework. Our working group was asked to create a framework, which we titled Agency in the Anthropocene, in order to inform the development of the science test and questionnaire. So we're currently at the process now when we go to Singapore of looking at the pilot studies to see which test items have been successful in terms of reliability and various other metrics. And then that'll go forward to actually implementation next year. Our focus on our framework was looking from the notion of polycrisis, looking at these multiple colliding crises which are generated from human impacts, and the idea that young people must know about this and be able to make responsible decisions and actions in order to go forward with their lives. So if you'd like to look more at the framework, you can download it from that particular address. It's an interesting read, we think. But let's focus on the main COPUP or focus of today's presentation, looking at this idea. Now, the OECD, not surprisingly, as a global bureaucracy, has a specific agenda and can be seen as spreading an hegemony, probably, rather than a hegemony. Anyway, one of those things. And is a very powerful organization, has a lot of influence. And so a lot of people take note of what the OECD says, and they have specific agenda. It also has reach then and is influential in shaping education. There are multiple examples of countries looking at what PISA has provided in terms of outputs and then making decisions on what they do in a politically orientated process. PISA data is used for within country and cross-country analysis. So countries kind of look at how they're going and think, oh, gee, we're doing well or we're not doing well. We need to fix some stuff. And then they look at other countries and go, oh, we're not doing as well as them. So, you know, when the PISA rankings come out, as possibly in your country and certainly in mine, there's always a furore about where we're sitting in those rankings. So that's a very politically orientated process. So we felt that getting more environmental focus into PISA could help raise the profile of environmental education and be used to influence government to enhance opportunities for environmental education as it moves forward. Now, that environmental focus had been driven partly by the OECD. They invited us in. They were more and more engaged in thinking that young people needed to know about environmental challenges and to be able to be positioned to go forward and to deal with these, because they recognize in their thinking, I suspect, because they're an economic and development organization, that economic development was actually predicated on young people being able to do this. And so that was a helpful thing, I think, in terms of thinking about that. And the process then of creating the framework and its implementation and test and questionnaire items have also been political. The work with creating the framework engaged us together as a four, but also with other people, and we had to debate and discuss and frame where those things sat. And then the implementation into the test and questionnaire items were also, oh, I'm not sure if that's going to work. How is that going to go down with this country or that country? If we've got 92 odd countries involved this coming year, in the process, there was a lot of feedback about the nature of some of the items and the kind of ideas in the framework initially, so that we needed to bear in mind how it could be used in many different jurisdictions. So then finally, the leveraging it as a political process. As environmental educators, we were very conscious of the fact that our work to foreground the challenges that we face as socio-ecological, and Paul, I think, mentioned that significantly in his introduction, to think about the anthropocentrism that was involved in that place, and to require competencies from across the cognitive, affective, and agentic domains. Now, this is not an easy thing when it comes to doing tests. So that's a work in progress, I think, across the planet.
Yeah.
But however, that's where we're sitting at the moment. And so one of the questions that we grappled with right throughout this process, and I'd be really interested in hearing your views, is should we be actually doing this? Is participation in PISA actually counterintuitive to the goals of EE, getting embedded in the hegemony of a globalized organization, which is, let's say, mostly orientated towards Europe? That's where its location is. Although obviously they gather views from other parts of the world. So there was a real sense of tension, I think, about balancing what we were trying to do. And we're very well aware of the literature out there that criticizes PISA for the kinds of things that it can do in a counterproductive way in an education system. And finally, though, we've done it. We went ahead and committed ourselves to it. And the question now then is, from a political point of view, how should we position ourselves as environmental educators to take advantage of the opportunity and use it to leverage curriculum? When those data come out next year, when the results come back, how are we positioning ourselves to be ready to take advantage and to provide expert advice or interpretation of that data, to then use it to lobby in different ways? In a sense, it's a wonderful opportunity because there's a lot of really interesting environmental education data that's going to come out of it that we should be very cognizant of and be ready to act on it. So I'll leave you with those thoughts for possible discussion in our small groups, and I look forward to that happening shortly. Thanks, Peter. Back to you.
Thank you, Chris. We have time for a quick thank you from everybody. Bit of appreciation. Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, how do I get rid of that? There we go. Okay, our next presentation is a pre-recorded presentation from Hala Lotsasiska. So just to remind you, we have a Padlet. I think the link is in the chat. Again, for use now if you've got great ideas you want to share, or for use during our discussion. But I'm really pleased to be able to introduce you to Hala through her pre-record. Her presentation is towards a politics of transgression in environmental education research. A shout out to Hala. This manuscript is not quite yet available via First View, but will be in a day or so. I'm absolutely confident. So let's listen to Hala. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are. I'm happy to be joining you, although virtually, this evening. I am Hala Lotsasitka from Rhodes University in South Africa, and I'm sharing a piece this evening on a paper that I've just submitted to the special issue in the Australian Journal of Environmental Education on the politics of environmental education research. And the paper's title is Towards a Politics of Transgression in Environmental Education Research, and it's constituted as a meta-review of a T-Learning research archive, which I'll tell you a little bit more about as we go along. So the paper's foundations lie in an understanding that there's a need for more radical forms of learning-centered transformation, and that this is increasingly recognized in transformations to sustainability. It is also underdeveloped and an under-theorized area of research, especially from a politics and environmental education research perspective. So the data that I draw on, or the story that I draw on the archive, is from a large program that we've been coordinating for a number of years now, 8 years. It was funded by the International Science Council initially, but it's also been expanding since then. It's involved 9 countries, 4 continents, and quite a large number of researchers, which I'll also share with you in a minute. The problem that we're trying to deal with in this big research program is how to do transgressive learning in and as environmental education research in times where the fallout of coloniality and fossil capital collide in an increasingly regressive political landscape. So we were first very curious about this when we saw in the IPCC report in 2014 that learning was important for climate change response, but not enough was known about the types of learning that are necessary for the kind of change and responsibility that we need. So this is where we started out, and we've been moving quite fast since then, actually, and really working primarily in the global south, and this dealing with this particular problem, and that is that most of the knowledge that we currently have on learning has been produced not in the global south, but actually elsewhere, as you can see from this little diagram here, and addressing what has come to be known as the abyssal line of modern science. And we think that there's a lot more that we can learn about T-learning from this space, and also to surface epistemologies of the South as we do that. So, and this is particularly because you can see the knowledge imbalance in relation to the kinds of challenges that people are dealing with. This is just a picture of no water access, and this is the picture of knowledge production. So, these are the kinds of challenges we're trying to deal with in this research program. So we embarked on this in a research project that was funded initially by the International Science Council in their Transformations to Sustainability program. And it was a big network of researchers from a number of continents and countries, as I've mentioned already. And the method of this paper really draws on two dimensions. The one is the actual cases that were done in the research program, which established a T-learning archive. And we have been approaching this reflectively as the program has unfolded. And this paper is constituted as a meta-reflective curational process and provides a view of this archive or this T-learning knowledge commons collection. And it's quite an extensive collection, over 60 plus published papers. I draw mainly on the published papers in the paper, but there's also, vast body of other work, for example, postgraduate studies, which are also referenced in the paper. And then there's also another range of work, such as songs, films, poems, curriculums, demonstration sites, and other outputs of the actual research project, which I haven't drawn on in such detail, but have used them as evidence of the T-learning processes that I report on in the paper. So one of the things that we were trying to do with this research program is to really look at the learning sciences and look at what we know about learning. Most of the literature there is dominated by acquisition and participation metaphors. And so we really try to develop this transgressive T-learning metaphor, as we call it, and really looking at the construct of T-learning from a transformative, transgressive, transdisciplinary together perspective, with an emphasis on transgression, because that was actually the most underdeveloped in the literatures. And we had to draw on a range of different theoretical dynamics, learning theory, plus sociology, psychology, philosophy, politics, decolonial theory, feminism, political ecology, science studies, post-humanism, critical realism, and more. And so we see a sort of theoretical pluralism. And one of the things I deal with in the paper is this theoretical pluralism and its contribution to us coming to understand T-learning as a politics in environmental education research. So there's a number of cases in this archive. I'm not going to go into them. I'm just going to show you some images quickly. This is, but essentially what we did was we worked with heterogeneous cases, multi-leveled cases, this theoretical plurality, and then generative methodologies, and a range of sustainability activities that people were working on across academic social boundaries. We developed methodology for this kind of co-engaged, co-defined forms of T-learning, how to expand collective learning, and then also tools to describe the learning processes in order to share them. We've published quite widely on this work already in other journals as time went on. So this paper is really a synthesis of a whole body of an enormous body of work. So here's some of the cases. This is the Ethiopian case dealing with sacred natural sites. This is the Malawi case dealing with indigenous knowledge and food security in contexts of recurring drought. South African cases were multiple cases, in fact, networked studies focusing on indigenous and scientific knowledge of food, rainwater harvesting, and so on. This is a Vietnam case dealing with scientific farmers or farmers that were working with scientists in the Mekong Delta. This is a Zimbabwean case working across monocultures of agriculture, building solidarity networks at multiple levels. This is another case from South Africa dealing with the knowledge in the education system itself, trying to distill African liberatory pedagogy. This is a huge case which has been emerging in the last 4 to 5 years, focusing on ocean governance and working particularly with a methodology called amphitheater, and with enormous impact, working across the country, different towns, large numbers of audience members, huge numbers of feedback represented at the COP27, and actually worked on transforming the foundations of environmental law in the country. So in the paper, the paper is structured according to these 3 subheadings mainly, which is how I've curated the archive as a transgressive politics of environmental education research. Firstly, I look at working with theory as low theory, drawing on Mackenzie Walk's work, as a low theory politics in T-learning research. Secondly, I look at research practice as politics of co-engaged, expansive, and explicitly transgressive learning praxis, and then look at the knowledge as co-produced. Of course, the knowledge as co-produced are about sustainability practices themselves, but also about T-learning. And here we've worked on differentiating transformative, transgressive, transdisciplinary together. And in the paper, I also share this little outcome. It's a sort of synthesis outcome of our kind of co-definings of this scope of interpretation of T-learning. And this is really important because we were really trying to develop the concept of this kind of learning, as I mentioned earlier, to expand acquisition and participation metaphors into this sort of T-learning arena, which is a different arena for ways of thinking about learning. So you'll see looking at transformative learning differently, transgressive learning, particularly looking at explicitly challenging normalized practices, cultures, and systems that have become oppressive. And to do that in different ways is what was very significant to us. Transdisciplinary learning, which is more familiar to many people nowadays. And then, of course, together, all of this is collective. It's a collective form of learning working towards the common good. So some of the summative perspectives is that we can see that T-learning, as co-defined through our work, can contribute to change in human activity and social material relations at multiple levels. T-learning also introduces a change in politics away from modernist and colonial framings of emergence to more subtle, co-engaged and connected relational forms of emergence and change. And T-learning processes have made differences to the lives of those most marginalized. And this basically says that political transgressions are not just rhetorical politics in environmental education research, but are actually realized in the lives of people. So theoretically, we have found that it's a diversity, plurality of onto-epistemic commitments that shape the meanings of what a politics of transgression in T-learning environmental education research could be, sort of along the lines of the pluriversal politics as articulated by Escobar. And then overall, this work joins a larger conversation on the politics in contemporary times, particularly addressing Fanon's question, who will change the colonial world? And Escobar's recent question, how to reweave the communal basis of life, which calls us into coexistence with others and the more than human world. So overall, the paper offers a contribution to recentering politics in environmental education research as transgressive learning movement. And with that, I really want to just thank you all for giving me the chance to introduce the paper. I hope that the discussions will be productive. I want to thank Paul and Peter for the invitation and for working along with me on the paper. and also to acknowledge all of the T-Learning Transformative Knowledge Network researchers that are referenced and acknowledged in the paper, the country case coordinators that I worked with, the lead researchers in the different countries and cases, the postdocs that were on the program, and also the communities involved. There are many, many people to name, so I haven't actually named all of them here, but you can find the full acknowledgements in the actual paper. So thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope that the rest of the proceedings go very well. And I look forward also to reading the other papers in the journal. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I wish everybody well. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you to Hala. Please share with me to send some love her way. We're going to move straight on to our third presenter in this session. I'm really pleased to introduce to you Helen Kopnina, who's presenting on behalf of herself and Tim Bedford. The paper is called From Pseudo to Genuine Sustainability Education, Eco-Pedagogy and Degrowth in Business Studies Courses. And here we have Helen.
Okay. Hello, my name is Helen Kopnina. I work at Northumbria University in the northeast of the UK. Previously to that, I used to work in the Netherlands, and I'm a bit of a mixed bag as far as my accent is concerned. A Russian-born US and Dutch citizen. So there we go.
Thanks, Helen. Can you tell us a little bit about the manuscript that you've had published in this special issue?
So me and my equally, let's say, mixed background colleague and co-author Tim, who presently lives somewhere off the grid, but basically is an Englishman living normally in Oslo or in Finland, intermittently. We have been quite concerned about certain hegemonic tendencies of education for sustainable development goals, both from the practice, teaching perspective, as well as theoretically. In both of those things, theory and practice, and perhaps I should also add ethics, morality, add to the mixture of this concern. Basically, if I may put it in a nutshell, I guess our largest concern, especially in the context of special issue about power, is the decision-making process that goes into formation of something like Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations, by UNESCO in particular, and the fact that they are passed on without questioning in the curricula of pretty much every single university on this earth, as far as we could see. We have been, in fact, looking at university programs within, in particular, business schools, but perhaps we could have looked as a next step of research broader than that. But business schools, we've even looked at educational programs in continents of Africa and Asia, as well as here in the UK or in Finland, or indeed in Australia, Canada, United States, etc. It just seems quite normative, normal, in fact, to equate sustainable development goals with sustainability. And the core of our article is it really the same as environmental sustainability? So basically, in a nutshell, our problem is not with individual sustainable development goals, because individually they're all fine, starting with number 1 and 2, no poverty, no hunger, etc. It just together, they represent a kind of oxymoron, a kind of paradox, in which if you achieve one, or we can also say it's a wicked problem, you achieve one, and that also means that it can affect another negatively. So having a wealthy, healthy, growing population, and yet having the health of ecosystems intact, having your cake and eating it too. The kind of thing in which, in particular, things like environmental problems are talked about in very anthropocentric terms, even SDG 14 and 15, life underwater, life on land. It's about the use of biodiversity, the use of terrestrial and marine biodiversity oftentimes. And that in itself means that things that are not economically or socially or however else useful, the leftover species, might go extinct, might be endangered, but then Sustainable Development Goals are not really addressing that. So what we were discussing was the type of curriculum that might be different as an alternative to that. Oh yes, and I forgot to say perhaps the elephant in the room is economic growth. The fact that it's not just SDG 8 that speaks about decent work and economic growth, but basically if we look at 169 sub-targets of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals, a very large PDF document, listing all these targets, what we do see is there's a huge amount of accent on economic growth as the solution to all of these goals. So when we have poverty, for example, it's very much about economic growth as a solution. We have hunger, the same thing. And yet in critical literature on sustainability, economic growth is oftentimes seen as the problem because it's linked to increased consumption of natural resources. Absolute decoupling of the economy from resource consumption appears very difficult, especially when it comes to material products such as food, shelter, the basic needs, and clothes and things like that. So what the article is trying to problematize is basically this focus on economic growth, looking at alternatives such as steady state economy, education for steady state economy, education for degrowth. And very pragmatically speaking, because we're talking about business schools and profit for them is perhaps the bottom line. So speaking about this sustainable development, not just as a beautiful idea that, if we think about it literally, we're sustaining development, which is industrial development and economic development, problematizing that and looking at things like, for example, the same circular economy, can it really decouple resource consumption from the economy? Steady state economy, can we keep the population demands of the growing, let's say, market, etc., in some kind of balance with what happens with planetary boundaries? So how do we teach that to business students who are used to seeing profit as the bottom line and not planet as foundational for both people and profit? And indeed, there are ways of doing that. And some of the ways of discussing it is through the same business models that use, let's say, product to service shift. So speaking of circularity, in this case, we would be talking about, for example, making products which are durable, so no built-in obsolescence or planned obsolescence, but basically last forever. Let's say in Newcastle, where I'm at, castles are still there. They were built hundreds of years ago, they're still there. We don't need to build new buildings sometimes if the ones that already exist can be maintained, repurposed, etc., and kept basically as they are. So the kind of services that could substitute for manufacturing that can apply to electronic products as well. This is the kind of thing that we could teach to business students, for example. So that's it in a nutshell.
And there we have Helen. So please, thank you to Helen. Thanks for joining me there. Actually, I didn't want to stop sharing, but I do very much want to share the Padlet with you. So I've popped the link in the chat and just ask you to open that on your computer. Excuse me, because we're now going to head into a small group discussion. I'm going to pop you in a breakout room, and there should be something that pops up on your screen and says accept moving to this breakout room. and it'll sign you automatically. You won't be able to see anything from the main room again. So keep open all the things that you need open for your discussion. When you get into your breakout room, please introduce yourself and then have a chat with your colleagues who have joined you. I'm randomly assigning you, so I have no idea who'll be there with you. Enjoy your conversation, reflecting on these 3 presentations and papers in particular, or really anything you've heard from this morning or anything you want to draw to the conversation. We've got 20 minutes. I'll post you some messages that'll come through Zoom that'll indicate 5 minutes left, 1 minute left, and really encourage you to post some things on the Padlet, because when we come back together, we'll have 10 minutes just to explore the Padlet and invite comment from all of you about what you've been able to post there. So I know that sometimes moving into a breakout room can get scary, but I'm really confident that in this space, it will be a wonderful experience. So stay in the room if you've got any questions and I'll help you out. Otherwise, I'm opening the rooms and I hope you have a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Hi, Peter.
Welcome back from your break. Thank you very much for joining us again. In this section of our symposium today, we're presenting Collection 2, which is a fabulous set of presentations from 3 manuscripts. And we're really pleased today to have 4 authors joining us. Our first presentation is with Robin Bellingham and Al Fricker. Our second presentation, Cassandra Tytler, and our third with Bronwyn Davies. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand over to Robin and Al for our first presentation. Thanks, Robin. And hi, Al. Great to see you here.
Hi, everyone. I'm just trying to get my camera to turn on.
So I think Al's going to kick us off.
Yeah, thank you. So as I begin today, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners where I'm currently located. They are the Wurundjeri people of the Eastern Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I also pay my respects to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters where this broadcast is being received, and any other First Nations people who'll be engaging with it as well. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the ancestors of all of the areas of the Australian continent and the adjacent islands where colonial, capitalist, extractive mining practices have been occurring for over 200 years. And I want to pay my respects and acknowledge them and their efforts to protect country in the face of almost complete destruction. And my thoughts go out to them and their ongoing struggles and battles against the mining conglomerates. So our paper was looking at mining in the curriculum, specifically through how the gold rush is presented as part of the primary history curriculum. Part of our study involved us actually going on a bit of an excursion to Sovereign Hill, which is described as a living museum, and also to the Eureka Centre, which is the Centre for the Birth of Democracy in Australia. And through experiencing those places and also conducting an analysis of the primary exactly how mining and mining interests are being positioned within the curriculum in ways that make it incredibly difficult to adequately address the challenges of climate change and mining's role in the extraction of fossil fuels as a compounding factor. Did you want to add anything at this point, Robin?
No, keep going.
No worries. So what we found was in all the ways that the gold rush is portrayed, it's done so in a very uncritical, unproblematic narrative of colonial progress. It's often seen as the catalyst for democracy, the catalyst for egalitarian and the robustness of Australia's neo-colonial political system. And the impacts of mining on country and on First Nations people are largely glossed over and ignored and erased. So part of our paper was to both identify the curriculum and then put forward possible ways forward. And as a very proud Judge Wurrung man myself, my traditional country is smack bang in the middle of the Central Goldfields region in Victoria. And myself and my ancestors were all directly impacted by the Victorian gold rush. And so one of the ways forward that we explored was possibly recentering the gold rush and challenging the colonial mythology of the narrative of progress, and possibly even starting from a place where we actually asked the students and the teachers, whose gold was it? By way of asserting sovereign Indigenous power and acknowledgement over that material. We then looked at the possibilities of being able to include other aspects, looking at what the impacts of these extractive mining practices were on the landscape. And we found compelling responses, various reports and strategies that have been published by community-controlled organisations in these places, like the Judge Wurrung organisations and the Wadawurrung organisations, around how country is being rehabilitated and cared for in the context of having been dug up and having holes placed everywhere, and even such changes in the landscapes as to actually completely reroute riverine systems in order to use the water to assist in the extraction of gold, but also to move those waterways away from mining interests so they didn't fill up the tunnels. Robin, did you want to add anything to that point?
Sorry, I'm happy. Do you want to keep going and then I can jump in
Yeah, of
after you're done,
course.
if you like, with some thoughts? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And so we sort of put forward some possible approaches and then explored some of the potential implications that we could have. And part of our investigation was also highlighting how there are still organisations like the Mineral Councils of Australia and the likes of Gina Rinehart who are cozying up to the conservative wing of Australian politics in order to continue to push mining interests. There was an event where Peter Dutton was invited by Gina Rinehart to deliver a speech at a mining celebration, where he openly stated that the miners don't get a fair go in the curriculum, and children should be taught explicitly how mining has built this nation and how we should all be thankful and grateful and supportive of that. But the issue we have essentially is that if we fail to acknowledge the complexity and the challenges that mining produces in terms of our current ecological crisis, we're not giving our children the opportunity to consider ways forward where they can actually address issues of sustainability in terms of that cross-curriculum priority. But beyond that, we're essentially preventing them from gaining the required skills, both in terms of action and critical thinking, so that they can adequately address the environmental challenges which we're experiencing today and will continue to experience in the short to medium future, hopefully not long term. And so we need to call this out because this will have a direct impact on how we can address and respond to climate change and the global emergency. And that pretty much wraps up what I was going to say. So I'll throw it over to you, Robin, if that's okay.
Beautiful. Thanks, Al. That was really great. Yeah, so just like, I guess maybe only a couple of other things I'd throw on top of that. Around, I suppose, bigger picture aims. So one of, in addition to everything that Al's just said, one of our kind of general points that we're trying to make is that one of our jobs as educators is to sensitize ourselves to noticing where and when stories and narratives about places and histories or environments are represented in the public sphere as singular, so as in it's a happy consensus, there's no dispute, there's no plurality of those stories. And to teach ourselves to notice that, be skeptical about that, and teach others to be skeptical about that as well, and to stop participating in that kind of singular kind of thinking. And we are arguing that Victorian gold rush narratives are a really good example of this, and that we need to create and find ways to express multiple stories, including by learning in and with country and with place. So that was what was important to us, to travel to these sites as well on Dja Dja Wurrung country. Firstly, we both have a strong connection to Dja Dja Wurrung country. That's where I live at the moment, and as Al has explained, he has a very strong connection there. Also, we argue that mining sites across the globe are significant kind of nodes of decolonial learning in themselves. They warrant special investigation because they've got special potency as sites of extractivist mattering and meaning making. And then thirdly, the Victorian gold rush sites are subject to a particular kind of singular, ostensibly legitimised narrative, which is cherished in Australia, and it's even kind of sacrosanct as an origin story, the story of the gold rushes, which is entangled in the place, culture, and identities here. So this in itself makes the Victorian gold rush a challenging but necessary target for critical consideration. I think I should probably stop now because I think we've used our time.
That's perfect. Thank you, Robin and Al. If everyone can join me in celebrating their efforts in bringing us into their manuscript. And of course, you can read more in the special issue, and I'll pop the link in for your manuscript very quickly. I'm sorry that I haven't done that already. I'd just like to hand over now to Cassandra Tytler, who is going to present her manuscript, Queering Apocalyptic Methodologies, Enacting the Utopian Performative Through Digital Art Practice in Environmental Education. Thanks very much. Over to you, Cass.
Hello there, everyone. Now, can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, then I will start. Well, actually, as a starting point, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm in Wajak Noongar Boodja, which is in Western Australia, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all First Nations people here today, and respectfully acknowledge their continuing care and custodianship for culture, community and country. And I also acknowledge that this land was never ceded. Now, images that you'll see in this PowerPoint are from a VR artwork, which is titled Thalu Dreamtime is Now, directed by Nagaluma man Tyson Morrowan, and graphics are by Stuart Campbell. So I don't actually discuss the images in this presentation, but they're analysed in the AJEE paper that I'm drawing from. Okay, so next slide. Could I ask you two to be quiet a little bit, please? Sorry, I'm in a shared space, everyone. In responding to this call, I was inspired by a text in magazine by Wurgaya and Wemba Wemba woman Susie Anderson. So to quote, she says, "Through technology, First Nations people make an uncolonised world virtually real." So this statement is both celebratory, highlighting the visions technology offers, and deeply troubling, reminding us that colonisation's violence is still very much alive in Australia. The recent referendum's denial of a voice to Parliament for First Nations people starkly illustrates this. So what does this mean when digital technology, something fleeting and ephemeral, offers a glimpse of an uncolonised world rather than in-lived political change? My paper wrestles with these tensions, exploring how digital spaces might resist colonialist and environmental realities amid our climate crisis. Western imperial logic perpetuates uneven power relations, while the technology within these systems furthers extractivist practices, pushing industry forward as environmental crises escalate. Technological systems are often used to fix mistakes created by previous technologies or exploited by some to escape Earth while it burns. Hal Abdillah and Newman call to decolonize the digital, highlighting that positivist science reproduces bias and inequality, often at the cost of the environment. Science, technology, and technology are not neutral. They are loaded with issues of access, privilege, and power. Yet technology also holds the potential to dismantle colonial structures and amplify voices and knowledges previously silenced. They note digital storytelling's power in promoting Indigenous worldviews, a step forward, decolonising the digital space. But this is not a finished project. It's an ongoing process that requires, quote, active awareness of the pathology, implicit racism, and cultural assumptions and bias within Western systems, end quote, alongside a commitment to amplifying silence histories that challenge dominant narratives. This leads to a critical question. Where does environmental education fit into this? How do we teach about the environment while addressing the complex realities of the climate crisis tied to socio-political inequalities? I draw on Coro and Waldmuth, who call for a shift in environmental education through apocalyptic methodologies. They propose embracing the unpredictable and chaotic nature of our world, rejecting the need to control methods to fit Enlightenment ideas of singular truths. Instead, they advocate for a flexible methodology that confronts the absurdity of current extractive paradigms, establishing a space for learning and teaching that accommodates uncertainty. There is no singular way to teach or learn, and no rigid curriculum or fixed endpoint. Building on this, I propose we take it further and queer apocalyptic methodologies. Queerness rejects binaries and fixed categories, celebrating the fluid, relational, and dynamic. Queer practices understand how power constructs identities shaped by patriarchy, colonialism, and heterosexism, among other factors. This aligns with Russell's concept of queer eco-pedagogies, which complicates education and cultural narratives. Russell states that, quote, there is no consensus on what is queer about nature, pedagogy, gender, or sexuality. So a queer eco-pedagogy movement could be thought of as plural, as a home for multiple pedagogies, end quote. I queer apocalyptic methodologies as a counter-hegemonic stance that, as Russell says, quote, undermines the logics and values of a dominant capitalist colonial worldview, end quote. I do this while remaining thoughtful about pedagogy, with particular interest in how digital art can interrogate into these practices. At the heart of this is Munoz's concept of the utopian performative, centered on potentiality, what Munoz calls queer futurity. The utopian performative creates spaces that can be felt and imagined, but don't yet exist in our current reality. It envisions better futures that unveil the limitations of the present. So art, especially, is a powerful medium for enacting these utopian performatives. Art transcends traditional boundaries, allowing imaginative engagement with complex ideas and politics. Art disrupts colonial narratives, challenges entrenched assumptions, and creates space for alternative, plural ways of thinking. Digital extended reality, or XR technologies, offer exciting possibilities for environmental education. Returning to Anderson's quote at the start, XR creates immersive spaces where we can enact the utopian performative, fostering agency, subjectivity, and relational ways of engaging with environmental concepts. It offers a powerful anti-colonialist and counter-hegemonic tool in pedagogy, allowing learners to explore new ways of thinking about the world and how it must change. Munoz's utopian performative and queer apocalyptic methodologies suggest XR technology in environmental education can be an activist tool for imagining new futures that are not prescriptive or fixed, but rather represent potentiality, what should be but isn't. By embracing this perspective in environmental education, we can foster teaching and learning that challenges colonial histories and offers relational, responsible approaches to the climate crisis. Thank you very much. I have to work out how to stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you, Cass. That was brilliant. If everyone could show your appreciation for Cass, thank you. I'm really looking forward to these discussions that are coming up, but we have one more fabulous presentation to go. I would like to introduce you to Bronwyn Davies. Bronwyn is going to present New Principles to Live By and a Change of Skin. Over to you, Bronwyn.
Thank you. I'm in Sydney, New South Wales, in the very site where colonialism in this country began. And so I would acknowledge the Eora Nation, the people who my very own direct ancestors were responsible for assaulting with colonisation in the beginning of our life here, and the difficulty of dealing with that. Humans, both individually and collectively, are part of the matter of the world, the matter with the world, some might say. We're entangled in the human and more than human mattering of the world. What we do and what we say, write, listen to has material effects. We're not above the world and supreme as we once thought. What we are, contrary to the tenets of neoliberalism, is relational, and how we relate matters. How we respond within the intricate tangles of relationality that make up our individual and collective lives forms the possible ethical basis of existence. Many of us study and work in institutions so neoliberalized that we cannot imagine any other way to be. And unpracticed as we are at seeing discourse at work on us and on our desire, we often don't realize we've been taken captive within a limited and limiting set of thoughts and practices. Reflexive awareness is always elusive, but we need conversations that resist cliches and platitudes and that work toward the development of counter discourses. Be achieved once and for all. There are no solutions. There's only the ongoing practice of being open and alive to each meeting, each interaction, so that we might use our ability to respond, our responsibility to help awaken, to breathe life into every new possibilities for living justly. This paper is an invitation to you, to us, together, to breathe life into new possibilities for each other and for the planet. The neoliberal rationality of growth as an unquestionable good, economic growth as an unquestionable good, depends, Leff argues, on a permanently growing consumption of natural resources, matter and energy, which runs up against the limits of the planet's provision, productivity, and renewal of resources. Calling development sustainable, which is what people want, when in fact you mean development as usual, is one of neoliberals' favourite strategies. Those of us who were around in the 70s lament the loss of the revolutionary force that was unleashed in that decade. We lost that force with the advent of neoliberalism and its commitment to growth and profit, and to weasel words like sustainable development, which enable the government to continue as usual. Wohlleben tells us, by way of example, of professional foresters who've lately been tightening their hold on their habituated ways of doing forestry, clear felling old forests, for example. They secure government subsidies for their destructive work. Wohlleben points out that if they would only remove a few trees and then leave the forest alone, the forest would regenerate itself. But that is not what they're doing. What we need, says Wohlleben, is not massive government handouts to enable the continuation of the same destructive forestry practices, but the knowledge and the will to allow forests to become healthy and resilient again. Forests, he argues, that could save the planet. Within neoliberal systems, an individual must compete to survive, shape up as the individual the employer or funder thinks it wants. That is, as an individual who can, year after year, be ever more productive, and who will not argue with the system or institution that presses down on them so ruthlessly. Individuals have learned to turn their critical gaze inward, seeing themselves as the one who is at risk of not making it, who is perhaps too weak to make it, who is ever able to be construed as a pathological failure if she or he fails to meet the ever-increasing demands. To succeed, in extreme cases, they learn to shoot protesters, or when at war, shoot innocent people and innocent children. It is what the system requires of them, that they lose their conscience and become a good boy trained like a dog with small rewards. While survival is individualized under neoliberalism, the systems that are undoing us are made unanalyzable and unrevisable. Critique for many is death. In the face of the planet's death, growth is still tossed around as an unquestionable good, that is, economic growth. In the current order, the intensifying of individual vulnerability, silencing the ones who criticize, is a perfect recipe for shutting down new ways of thinking. Gerges, a scientist who willfully critiques government practices, laments, not only are we unraveling the only life force known to exist in the entire universe, but in the last year, she says, Australian federal and state governments provided a total of 11.1 billion in funding and tax breaks to assist fossil fuel industries, even while legislating a commitment to cut our emissions 43% by 2030. Leff also argues forcefully that we need new principles to live by, not growth, but a new production paradigm and a strategic political program to deconstruct economic rationality, while at the same time constructing environmental rationality. What is needed is the decolonization of our minds and a change of skin. In despondent moments, however, I conclude that it's too hard for us humans to change our ways, to decolonize our minds, and to change our skin. Jane Goodall writes books like The Book of Hope and makes inspiring films with titles like Reasons for Hope. But every now and again, when faced with the extent and ferocity of resistance to change in neoliberal governmentality, I lose hope. Unlike snakes who can shed their skin each year, sloughing it right off, human skin is flaky. Our old habits turn out to be destructive in ways we never imagined. And so we flounder in seeking the just thisness of each moment and becoming open and alive to each other, human and more than human, and to a planet that is so desperately in need of our loving attention. Oops, sorry. We turn deaf ears to what we cannot bear to hear, each one individually overwhelmed as we try to think about, to feel our way into what needs to be done, collectively, symbiotically, enmeshed with others in the world, of the world, We must find new ways to be human, shedding our old skins and our old habituated sources for comfort and discomfort. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Bronwyn. I'm going to invite you to come into your breakout room now for discussion. There's so much to say. Just going to pop the link to the Padlet in again in case that is an option that you would like to use to express your thoughts and ideas.
So how do we get into our small groups again? I've forgotten.
There will come a pop-up in just a moment, Bronwyn.
All right.
And you
Okay.
click on that and move. I've kept you in the same rooms except for a couple that I have coalesced for beautiful conversation. So have a wonderful conversation and we'll meet together again at 12:05. Sorry. Thank you. Al, would you like to stay for a chat? Can I pop you in a discussion room?
Fine by me.
Let me find a beauty for you.
I want a particularly good vintage, if that's possible.
Coming right your way.
Thank you.
And Bron, I'm going to pop you back in the room you were in.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what happened there.
No worries.
I haven't got much to say because that's just inspired writing.
Oh, I know. Brilliant. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back. I hope your conversations and discussions were as wonderful as the ones I popped into. Thank you very much to those of you who put some thoughts on the Padlet. If you're wanting to jump on the Padlet and have a look, I'll just pop the link in the chat. But we'd also like to open for discussion. So would anyone like to share their thoughts with us? Maybe report on the key points of the discussion that you had with your groups.
Peter, I'll report on it. We had actually a very wide-ranging and interesting discussion across continents and places, and it was around thinking with the body and thinking with the mind, and how really we need to learn to feel and learn to value affect as a way of thinking through the body, and that got us to talk about education systems and how they're set up and structures and leadership. So yeah, I tried to put some notes in the Padlet if anyone wants to read, but yeah. So Brian, Sarah, and Monty were all had interesting different things to say. Yeah.
Thanks, Russell.
I'd just like to say it's Robin here. Are you at Peter's house? Because I can see those trees in the background that I've seen before.
Yes.
The beautiful
at the end of the house.
Yeah, the beautiful
Tree
ferns. But I'd just like to say at the beginning we couldn't even talk. Like we had to sit there for about the first 5 minutes, just absorbing what we just heard and just be in the present moment. So yeah, very powerful discussions, and I suppose allude to just being present in the grief and the emotions, and then how can we move forward.
Thanks for sharing that, Robin. I think that's a really important acknowledgement. Sandra.
Yes, I was going to say we did the same thing. We sat quietly for a while And then we discussed various possibilities for how to change the world. And we didn't get all that far, but we're open to suggestion on how to do that and how to create a movement that pulls all of these brilliant ideas together and creates that change, since we're at the crossroad. How do we get out of the crossroad and create the change that we all want to be and live and see? So Russell and Cassandra just gave one way forward. What are all the others?
Well, I think we need to stay with the kind of special issues that we've moved toward and work as hard as we can where we think we can. Keep putting out special issues that relate to the problem with politics.
And solutions through politics somehow.
Yeah, somehow that's the problem. That's right. There's no more fun in the bush.
Jump in.
I think our group talked about imagining different futures, and I think we were struck by the question of, like, whose gold is it, and imagining that, like, just how do we shift our thinking to imagining different stories about who owns what and belonging, and is the gold actually belong to the indigenous people, or does it belong to the earth, or is it a combination of both? And then we moved into a discussion of imagining different futures via technology, and really imagining, and both of those were, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but both of those were connected to what Bronwyn shared with us, that the future that we need to imagine that isn't actually the future, it's timeless, it's the past, present, and future, is that everything's interconnected. And so all three of those presentations were interconnected through their intraconnection and entanglement, even though they're all quite different. They were all led us back to that. How do we, as environmental educators, help others understand that interconnection and that entanglement, and asking those questions to move us towards that remembering? So thanks, Bronwyn, for reminding us of that in yours.
Lisa, I'm just thinking that it's not only environmental educators who will be thinking about interconnections, because I think listening to all of these papers, Paul, I'm thinking how politics is actually a term that, I mean, is very wide-ranging, because we're all living within structures and defined by structures, and that includes, not only our relationship with the non-human, but it's also about economics. It's about, as we know, about colonialism and race. And so as soon as you start talking about these things across those fields, you realize how kind of interconnected everything is in ways that make it really challenging, I think.
Yeah.
Al, please go. Yeah.
If I could respond to a couple of comments. Forgive my cynicism when it comes to politics. I don't think politics ever has solutions to anything. And especially in the context of Australian politics, it's predicated on the continued dispossession of myself, my community, my ancestors, and my descendants. And given that it is in and of itself a colonial construct, and decolonial praxis must be at the heart of environmental education, I don't see any solutions coming from politics. I think anything we do in Australia will be in spite of, not because of. And this is before we even start unpacking where the money comes from, because no one in the political context in Australia today has the guts to stand up to the mining lobby. And this is where a huge amount of the damage is coming from. And secondly, to respond to the question of the gold, I put it in terms of it's my gold in order to provide a connection to non-Indigenous people. But when I say that, what I actually mean is the gold belongs to country and it belongs in the earth. That is where it should be. But I also belong to the gold. And as the gold has been dispossessed from country, I in turn have been dispossessed from that part of country as well. And that is a hole in my being that I alone cannot fill. And when we think about the overall environmental destruction across the length and breadth of the continent and the adjacent islands, something I like to remind my students with is when whitefellas put scars upon country, we as mob, we are the ones who bleed. We are the ones who feel that deeply in our centres, deeply in our psyches, deeply in our spirits and our dreamings. And to place scars upon country in the way that it is done today to extract wealth and minerals for progress or whatever it means is to dishonour the dreaming that is held within country, to dishonour our dreamings as First Nations people, and to dishonour your dreamings as non-Indigenous people as well. And that is something that should be brought to the forefront of all of the conversations. Because as we care for country, we care for ourselves and we care for each other. These things, to speak back to that interconnectedness context, are not separate. They cannot be separate. They must be all done all at once, all the time. And this is where that should be our beginning point. Thanks, everyone.
Sandra. You're muted, Sandra. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I just suggested how to change the world. Just joking.
Oh.
What I was saying is that I'm with Al all the way, and using that same logic, we are in the future now. There is no other future. The future is fiction. So everything that we want to do, we need to do now. We are doing that now. And all of these things that everybody has said is all here with us, tangled into this room, tangled beyond the room. And, you know, as Paulina says, it's all about waking up the snake, waking up the consciousness of the people, because we're all here now. We all know what to do. It's doing it. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Well, maybe I'll jump in there and thank everyone for this really generative and generous discussion, and invite you to join with me in thanking everybody in both the special issues. We're now going to go into a fairly representative and tokenistic representation of a launching. I hope you find some humor in that, but just a blossoming of our ideas, a building of our community, a potential fertilization of future here now ideas, and just a really deep and heartfelt thank you for coming together as community, to share in the pleasure that AJEE has in presenting and hosting such incredible thought, generosity and action in our field of environmental education. Paul, I'd love to throw to you just for a moment, if you have some thoughts as we close out our research symposium.
Well, I guess each of us does what he or she can. You know, I'm sort of retired now from university work, but not retired. I don't think I'll ever be retired, because I think as long as there are people like this, some of the people and maybe all of the people in this group, continue to function as they are, and not give up. I think there's still hope. I mean, that's why we put the special. I think every issue should be a special issue, and I think it should be focused on some of the topics that people have been talking about today. And I think just take that to heart. I think let's put together special issues that continue the conversation and deepen it, and not shy away from the political part of it.
I think that's a really rich reminder that if you have a special issue in you that you would like to bring to life, like Kat, Scott, and Paulina, or Paul and I, please do write and let us know. We support you pretty well in how you go about pulling those ideas together. And we'd be really pleased to work with you to bring your thoughts and ideas together through AJEE.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming together today. Thank you very much for your enthusiasm and participation and staying with us throughout the whole process. It's just been a really lovely event, and I feel really, really privileged to be able to conduct with you these research symposia biennially. Final shout out to A Squared E Squared, our host organisation, who has an AGM tonight. If you'd like to be involved in either being a member of the organisation or in how the organisation runs, please be in touch. We would love to share those ideas with you about how you can be involved. And of course, AJEE is a wonderful, thriving community. So stay in touch with us, and we'd love to see you writing in AJEE, and we're happy to do what we can to support you with those aspirations. And a final shout out for special issues. Bring your great ideas and let's work on it together. So thank you so much for being with us today. Every one of you, really appreciated it. Special shout out to our presenters. 8 minutes is a tough ask, and I really appreciate that you managed to keep to time. Paul, it's an absolute pleasure working with you in special issues and everything we do in AJEE. For those of you who don't know, Paul was my PhD supervisor and has been a big part of my life. So lovely to have you here. And a shout out to, of course, to Kat, Scott, and Paulina, the other special, both special issues. Wow, I got dug in a hole there. Thank you very much for today, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.